Hi guys, welcome back to my travel corner, and what a special video this is going to be because you've just joined me outside Portsmouth and Southsea railway station, and well, today marks the 100th anniversary of Portsmouth gaining its city status. Now I'm just going to come round because this was the station that sort of started it all off. So just the main area, the main station itself, was, before it all started, this was called Portsmouth Town, and we had trains running on the Southsea branch, and that closed in 1921. And 4 years later, this station was renamed to Portsmouth and Southsea, and then it was the year after that, in 1926, that this whole place became a city after integrating with Southsea. And it's an interesting piece of history which started the ball rolling for Portsmouth. I'm just looking at this building which has fairly recently been rebuilt. We've got some tall buildings here in Portsmouth. Wow, and look at this one as well. We've also got another building around the area that reminds me of Minecraft, but then that's a different story altogether. It's just incredible how everything's just falling into place. I'm in awe every time I step foot into this very city. So this video then shapes this journey. This video takes you along the journey of what happened and what happened over the last 100 years and how it shaped Portsmouth as a whole. See you in a bit, guys, as I take you to another place of interest. So I certainly remember it from my younger days. Welcome back, guys. You've just joined me now in the biggest car park in all of Portsmouth. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, but what remotely does a car park have to do with anything based on what happened in Portsmouth over the last 100 years? Well, the area that I'm stood at this moment used to be the Tricorn, one of the biggest buildings in Portsmouth. And if you look behind me, so turn round, I'll just try and put this in a particular light, and then you get to see what I'm feeling. So this bit that is now stood behind me is what remains of the old Tricorn building. But this was built in 1966 as a way to try and revitalise the area of Portsmouth. It also played host to the biggest Laser Quest building, and it also housed one of the very first Virgin megastores that were around at the time, and it also had some bars and pubs. And that bit behind me took you up to a car park. It was perfect, the ramp, because you had spirals that go up, same as you've got in Cascades over there. You had spirals that go up, take you up to the upper level, but then it might have been perfect for cars, but it wasn't ideal. It was far from ideal, should I say. It's far from ideal for any big vehicles like trucks and lorries and goods vans and what have you, because they struggle to traverse up and down the spiral. They were just too cramped. This also in the 60s had some flats installed, 8 of them as a matter of fact, and they unfortunately had lack of circulation in the walls. They were poorly constructed, and by 1979 only one of the original residents remained. But while the Tricorn was in its prime, it played host to some of the biggest bands in England, one of them being Status Quo. Unfortunately, as time went on, because we're in this particular area and it's Portsea Island we're talking about, the climate around this area can get pretty damp, and it can get really rather crazy damp. So by the time the 80s rolled round, stalactites began to grow and the structures started to weaken and the concrete was expanding. And in the 1990s, I'm just trying to get everything out, make sure I'm making sense of what I'm saying. In the 1990s, there were multiple petitions to have the Tricorn become a listed building, but they all failed because, given the climate of this island, it had fallen well beyond the state of easy repair. Not many people liked it. It was a rather Marmite approach. You either loved it or you hated it. Now, I remember this place when I grew up, because I was born in Portsmouth, and I used to come here to the Tricorn when it was around. I used to come here with my mum, and we used to be able to do this just to look around some of the shops. But I wasn't too remembering of what happened to the structure. I guess I was too young at the time to even think about that sort of stuff. We're talking about the 90s here. But by 2002, all the shops have left because they started leaving slowly, because they couldn't, because of this ramp behind me, because this ramp I'm now stood in front of, and all the goods vehicles were struggling to get up to the floor. Suppliers were struggling to get the bits that they needed in order to keep their business running. Sadly, to some, but not to others, this whole place was torn down in 2004. Took 10 months because of how big it was. And it's now become a massive car park. I think this should actually be called the Tricorn Car Park, unless it already is and I haven't even noticed. But join me back in a bit, and there's another piece of history of Portsmouth that is waiting to be discovered. See you in a bit, guys. Welcome back, guys. You've just joined me now at the back of a tube, and I have to say that even though I'm mainly going to be talking about what happened in Portsmouth over the last 100 years since it's become a city, I'm also going to put in some personal touches as well, because I mentioned a few times now I was born in Portsmouth, and we're just going to make our way up to the very place I was born in, at the very hospital I was born in 1989. So that would be something. Not only does it speak volume to the city as a whole, but then it also speaks as to why I felt it would be necessary to do something like this as a video. So just come out of Commercial Road, and we're just coming up to the civic offices. They've recently opened up a Premier Inn hotel, well, I say recently, it's been there for a good number of years now. I remember that getting built because I've seen it get built while I was studying at university for my masters. Speaking of which, this is one of the hoodies I got when I became course rep for the course that I was studying, which was information systems, and that was in 2014 that I did that, and then I graduated in 2016. Now I'm just about to pass the building. There we go. That bit, and that bit reminds me of a block in Minecraft. It's interesting though. It's interesting what you pick up in all the time that you've been going around your home city, as I call it. And with those buildings, it just definitely makes me feel at home because I love playing Minecraft. But join me back in a bit and I'll take you outside the hospital where I was born and I'll give you some more information on that. See you in a bit, guys. Welcome back, guys. You've just joined me now at St Mary's Hospital. Now, I was born in this very hospital in 1989, but the hospital itself has been around for much, much longer. There's also, a very long while ago, been a folk song called the Portsmouth Hornpipe, which then Mike Oldfield did a rendition of in his Omadorn album. But that's a different story. Can you imagine how much had changed at the hospital that I was born in? It's just really rather interesting what's gone on in certainly my lifetime, but I say my lifetime very loosely because we're looking at 100 years of what shaped Portsmouth to be the city that it is today. So much more to cover, and I cannot wait to take you on the journey throughout time and history. Now I'm going to be boarding a 12 next because there's something I also want to talk about in this video when it comes to the transportation of the area, and Tipner also plays a crucial role in that. But join me back in a bit as I board a 12 and do exactly that. See you in a bit, guys. Welcome back, guys. You've just joined me at the front of a 12 and making our way towards Tipner. Now, I just thought while I'm on here that I would just give some information about what the buses used to do in all the while that happened over the last 100 years. Next stop, Langston Road. And I've found some pretty interesting results. So, for example, the 69 I've been on in some of the videos on this channel, that used to start in Southsea, and that used to then go along the motorway and then carry on to Winchester that way. But then in 2005 that then was cut back to Fareham. Route 700, I've been talking about that for as long as I can remember, and that used to start at Southsea, that started at Clarence Pier, and I remember doing end-to-end on that many times in all the while that's been doing that, particularly since I've been on the bus, and that's now been split into 4, and the Portsmouth leg now terminates at Chichester. 45 and 45A, they used to start in Portsmouth and they used to go up to Denmead and Hambledon to Tipner respectively, but they now start at Waterlooville under the routes D1 and D2, and they're now taken over by Stagecoach. When I first got them, they were run by First.
Next stop, Hailing Avenue.
X40, used to get the X40 when I used to go down to university, because I was at Chelsea Close at the time, and I used to get the X40 to go down to Commercial Road, and I used to be able to get the bus from there, and that went along the motorway. That got scrapped when the 40 was renumbered to the 7. The 3 that runs between Southsea and Fareham, that used to be numbered 5. We do have a Route 5 now, but that runs just between Fareham and Gosport. Now, this is the interesting part. So I'm on a 12, you've heard Rick Jackson. I'm on the 12, making my way to Tipner. And the 6 and 6A used to do that as well. 7 and 8, when 7 and the 8 used to be numbered 40 and 41. I mentioned the 40, but the 8 used to be the 41. And the 7 used to run to Southsea, but that's now been cut back to the city centre. The civic offices is where that bus now terminates. But it's interesting the things that you look at when you research into what defines and shapes the city into what it is now, particularly when one is celebrating its 100th anniversary of gaining such a status. But join me back in a bit as I then take you on to another bus, and then I'll keep you updated as to what's going to happen next. See you in a bit, guys. Welcome back, guys. Just join me at the back of a 700. Now, I've done the history of what the buses did over the last 100 years in this area. Now I'm moving on to trains. So prior to 1926, Portsmouth had opened a station, and that closed in 1937 after 20 years of uncertainty, because it closed, it opened, it closed, it opened again. And this all happened 5 years apart of each other. Everything closed in 1917, reopened in 22, closed again in 27, reopened in 32, and then finally closed in 37. Hilsey then opened 4 years later after that. It's a working station now, mind you, and therefore there are no trains on a Sunday calling from Havants. Interestingly enough, we also had an airport in the area, which is wasn't too far from Hilsey Station, but then that closed in 73, and that is something unfortunately I would never get to see, because that closed way before my time. There was a project in Fratton that I come to think about it. There was a project in Fratton dealing with signalling points. So platform 1 of Fratton takes you out of the city, whereas platforms 2 and 3 takes you to either Portsmouth and Southsea, because we've got some terminus platforms there, or Portsmouth Harbour respectively. And that, it launched in late 2006, was meant to have taken 6 weeks, but it ended up taking 10 months instead. And Portsmouth Harbour, that is built on a pier with wooden structures, and it's always struggled with weight. Not many trains can sit at that station at any given time, but of course they've come up with an idea to try and level off some of that weight and the strain that's been put on the wood. But in order to do that, they had to decommission platform 2. So there's 4 platforms numbered to 5, and that's because there's no platform 2, and it hasn't been since 1992. Talks have been in place to reinstate the platform, and it can be done, but of course budget got in the way and it hasn't been done, and that is an absolute shame. There's something I wanted to talk about when we get back to where we started, and that was what happened in Portsmouth and Southsea. Which is why I haven't mentioned it here. We're going to do that at the actual station when I get back there. So join me back in a bit, and we do talk about just that, and then you get to see what caused that station to reduce the number of platforms it had. See you in a bit, guys.
700.
Welcome back, guys. You've just joined me back at Portsmouth and Southsea railway station, but I'm at the other end now because I just wanted to point out while I'm here that this railway station used to have 7 platforms, and then in the 1980s this building behind me was constructed and then reduced the platforms at Portsmouth and Southsea down to 4. Now, this used to be the home to a market here in the Portsmouth area, and that didn't attract too much attention after a while, and then it became a Matalan, and now look at it, it's completely derelict. Entrances are boarded up and everything, and if you look at the time, look at the clock behind me, you'll find that it's perpetually stuck at 10:24. Well, at the moment we are 11:43, 17 minutes to 12, and it just comes to show that this building is in a state of derelict. But this isn't the only building that's in that state. There's also one that used to be the post office. That's had some of its entrances boarded up. And then you've also got what used to be Debenhams over in Commercial Road. And that's also had some of it, that's also had all of its entrances boarded up. But then you also, that's the second building I was talking about. And there's Debenhams over there. Some of the windows have been broken as well in that building. It's an absolute shame that these major buildings have all gone the way of the dodo, and the chances are very likely that they're all going to get knocked down. But if they do, the future of these buildings remain to be unknown. But I'm thinking at the moment, if this building gets knocked down, well, looking by the state of it, it is highly likely that it might. It's highly likely that it will get knocked down because of how badly it is in the state, how much of a bad state it's in. Will this extend the Portsmouth and Southsea station back to its former 7 platforms? So you can't really do much with this car park unless you're coming off to board at Portsmouth and Southsea station. That's the only thing that's left around this area, and it's a shame because it used to be busking full of life. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this used to be a market hall, that used to be a post office, and that building over there used to be a Debenhams, all of which are now in a state of disrepair and derelict. Now, I was pretty heartbroken when I passed this in their state for the first time, because it's just been boarded up. It must be fairly recent, and graffiti's on there as well. But join me back in a bit and I will take you on another bus and explore some more history and how this area grew to the size it is now and what it is as a whole. See you in a bit, guys. Welcome back, guys. You've just joined me at the back of a 23, and it's an interesting one to note in this situation because we are looking at how the area of Portsmouth had grown. And I mentioned earlier that Southsea was integrated as a part of the Portsmouth area in 1926, just as it became a city. But since then, just mainly looking at the areas of the Long Island of Portsea, we then had it get extended into the mainland of the UK, because then Cosham, between 1920 and 1932, Cosham, Drayton, Walsgrove, Wimmering and Farthington were also incorporated into the Portsmouth area, just about to pass the international ferry port, which has been around and been modernised for ages. I'll have to give you some more information as to when it opened, but it also gives you international access to France, Spain and the Channel Islands. I do want to pay a visit to the Channel Islands one of these days. And also extends even further, because we're talking about the area, we're talking about a time of 1944, when we were at the peak of World War II and D-Day landings as well. And by the time this has all taken place, about 3,000 residents in the area of Portsmouth were made homeless, because Portsmouth had suffered substantial damage to its area. The area of Portsmouth played a critical role when it came to the wars, both world wars. But the Second World War was particularly damaging, and they had to think of something to house the 3,000 homeless that were there at the time. And they came up with an idea, which I will explore later on in the video. But join me back in a bit, and I will be in that particular area, and there'll be more in that to be explored as and when the time arises. So we'll be there very soon. See you in a bit, guys. Welcome back, guys. You've just joined me now in Lee Park, more specifically outside Park Parade. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, but Darren, you're in the Havant area now. What's this got to do with the celebration of the 100 years of Portsmouth gaining its city status? Well, remembering that I said earlier that Portsmouth had to find a way to house 3,000 homeless people after they sustained some critical damage to their own home turf. Well, they bought Lee Park off a well-known couple. I can't remember their names, unfortunately, but that was in 1944, and it was mainly Portsmouth that built the majority of the houses here, and not the Borough Council of Havant. It was mainly Portsmouth that did the building of these houses. And then they realised that at some point down the line that there were no shops and no amenities, or wasn't even a police station at the time. So they'd opened up the first few shops on Stone Square in 1952. Park Parade itself opened in 1955, and then you had Grading Well that opened in 1966. But this place has been around for 70 years. Well, it would have been, but yeah, it opened in 1955. And it's now thriving with businesses. I mean, there might be some places that have been shuttered, and there are other places that are in the process of being upgraded, and there are new places that are opening up, but then the houses have been redone as well. Got a nice colourful platform coming to the area of Park Parade, and I like what I've seen so far. But join me back in a bit as I wrap things up, because there's one more thing I forgot to mention while I was in Portsmouth, and I'm going to mention it in conclusion, and those would be the trains that ran at Portsmouth Harbour. See you in a bit, guys. Welcome back, guys. I've just joined me back at the back of a 22, and I'm going to be facing my longest time nemesis of many years gone past. So I've just thought I'd do this because there's a couple of things I forgot to mention. One of them was that in Portsmouth Harbour, until about 20 years ago, that there were cross-country trains that ran from Portsmouth Harbour all the way up to Liverpool and Manchester. And there was even another company called Wessex Trains. I don't know what they've become now. I think they've become something else completely. And they used to run their trains from Portsmouth Harbour all the way to Penzance. I suspect GWR took over on that one. Well, first Great Western and then Great Western Railway. But you get the gist of what was there when their trains ran to Penzance. But neither of those do that now. And what they have done is, what they do have, is what I was going to say, is they've got trains that still go up to London, whether it's Waterloo or Victoria, and then you also have GWR trains that go to Cardiff Central. You also get other trains that go to Brighton, but they now start at Portsmouth and Southsea. That's one of the things I forgot to mention. The second thing I forgot to mention also was around this area, was that I mentioned that Portsmouth bought out Lee Park, but they also extended out to Wesley when they built a new housing office in around that area. And they also, that council also then built Warren Park, which I'm just about to enter. It's been the first time in ages since I've come through here, particularly on my own accord. But this place was built up between 1966 and 1970. And there is a particular shortcut in this area. It's just over there. I used to treat that as a shortcut that took you into Lee Park Gardens. Now there is something I would like to try and do at some point, but I don't know how many times I find myself coming through Warren Park, because I really don't like it, to be fair. I lived here for 3.5 years, and it's been an absolute nightmare. Pretty rough, particularly around the time that I've been growing up. Because I've been living in this area from 2001, January 2001 to July 2004. But I just thought I'd quickly go around this area of the Warren to then quickly wrap up on how it developed. And as I mentioned, it was developed between 1966 and 1970. And then with that as well, there are some shops as well. I wonder what the old NSS news agency is doing. I think they might have changed that, but that's been around for a while. And now going to go left because this used to be the 23's job, and now it's split, and then it's split. Well, thank you for joining me on the journey of celebrating 100 years of Portsmouth. I know I ultimately ended up in Havant and in the Warren, and many kudos to myself for facing my long-time nemesis. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.